Hey everybody, I'm Rick Beato. Recently I had the honor of sitting down with one of the most influential and versatile jazz fusion guitarists of our time, Mike Stern. From his legendary work with Miles Davis to his acclaimed solo career, Mike's unique blend of jazz, rock, and blues has shaped modern guitar playing. In this interview, we'll delve into his creative process, the gear he uses, and the experiences he's had that defined his incredible career. Here's my interview. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mike Stern. Mike, it's such an honor to meet you and to have you on. This is really amazing. I first heard of you on the We Want Miles record, Jean Pierre.
Yeah.
And I followed your career forever.
Wow.
And it's such an honor to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here, and I'm really appreciative that you enjoy my playing. That means a lot to me, bro.
Okay, so you went to Berkeley, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who were the teachers there at the time?
I had a teacher named Larry Sinibaldi. That was the guy that at first I had as a private, they hooked you up with a private teacher.
Yeah.
And that was one guy. I was just going through they had a method, and I just didn't question it. I just did everything they wanted me to do. And even some people were saying, well, I've already done this kind of thing. I just said, let me just...
Talking like the William Levitt method or whatever.
Exactly.
And learning how to read
I thought
everything.
was cool. It worked for me.
Yeah.
Some people say, oh, it's not this or that. But for me, it worked great.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not an amazing reader, but I learned a hell of a lot more than I, before I started. Forget it. I couldn't read a note. And so I could read a little bit. I'd taken some private lessons, but when I got to Berkeley and started doing that method, it really helped me out. And Larry Sinibaldi, of course, Bill Levitt. I got a chance to study with Pat Metheny. He was there at the same time as a teacher. And phenomenal, man. I mean, a great teacher, I thought, because, he just, I was really shy at the time. I still kind of tend to be that way sometimes. It's like I sometimes feel very, I got a gig, oh, great, but yeah, I am kind of nervous about, you know what I mean? And I've always had that kind of yin-yang thing going on or whatever it is. And
okay, wait, what would be some of the things like with Pat that you guys would work on?
Pat said, well, we should just play. He said, what you really need to do is play. I went into where he teaches, and I said, I'd love to take lessons. And he said, yeah, I got some time right now, and let's just play a little bit. And we played Autumn Leaves. And I kind of scuffled through everything, and when we stopped, he said, man, you sound great. And so there's something about my playing that he liked. And because he was already dealing. He was 2 years younger than me and killing already, just playing his ass off. So then after that, he used to just mention stuff that I could work on, and he knew I was already working on chord scales and chord tones. He was always a big chord tone guy, which is a good way to start.
Okay, wait, explain chord tones to people. What is a chord tone?
What's a chord tone? Good question. I have no clue. But the chord tones are really the ingredients that make up the sound of a chord, And so if you have a C minor, and you have one of the chord tones would be the root, the C, and the next would be an E flat. That's what makes it a minor sound. And then the 5, the fifth, and that would be the flat third. The 5th is G, and if it's an E minor 7, the minor 7, the flat 7 would be a B flat. So you get this closed position. Most people might play it like this. For instance, this is one voicing, but so it's not straight up where C, E flat, G, and B flat. This is C, G, B flat, and E flat, but it's the same ingredients.
So Mike, if you're playing over a chord progression, C minor 7, F7, B flat, major 7, 2, 5, 1, and B flat, right? As you're switching chords, you're going for the certain chord tones. You might play the E flat on the C minor and go to the A on the F and maybe stay in the A and the B flat chord, right?
Right.
But you hear all those things, right? Because you've had all this background and ear training before that. So in addition to the technical part of understanding where the notes are, you studied with somebody like Charlie Banakis, who's a very famous ear training teacher and improvisation teacher.
Exactly.
Back in Boston.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about Charlie and the kind of things he did?
Just amazing. First of all, he was so inspiring, just his energy. Kind of, you remind me of him a little bit. We just met, but seriously, you have this, boy, you're into what you're doing and you're into music, I can tell. So Charlie was like that. He was very specific about how he would teach.
What would a Charlie lesson be like?
Well, first of all, when he used, for a lot of people, he would do different things for different people.
Okay.
'Cause they would, but a lot of times he would start with, for instance, taking one chord, say C major 7.
Yeah.
The chord tones are C, E, G, and B. That's the root. The third is the E, fifth is G, and B is the major 7. So you get this sound. And then he'd say, to get a little bit more bebop in there, it's a common thing of bebop to use some chromatics. A lot of them are around the chord tones. People just think sometimes it sounds like just chromatics to them, but they're kind of more logical than that sometimes, the way they're used. So he might start with chromatic from below each of those chord tones. So you have C, E, G, and B. So you put a chromatic from below the C, and it's B to C. And then an E flat to E would be the chromatic from below the third.
Yep.
G flat to G is the chromatic from below the fifth. And B flat to B is the chromatic from below the major 7. And so you can... It's a kind of a cool sound.
Yeah.
Right? You can... Usually he said that the chromatic, you can do it this way too, going down, but usually he said it's supposed to go up.
Okay.
Generally in bebop it does, but of course you can break all the rules. And he was a believer in that too. Another typical thing would be the scale from above. So if the scale is a C major scale, the scale from above each chord tone would be D to C, F to E, A to G, and C to B. Then he would put them together. Chromatic from below, scale from above, chord tone. Basically, that was some of the stuff that Charlie would teach, plus a whole lot of ear training, which I haven't done for years, but I was way into.
Would he have you sing notes of the chord or something?
I do that anyway.
Okay.
I always do like do ba 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 boo ba ba ba. C major 7, or do bo da bo da ba da ba. That's the chromatic from below, or da bo da ba da ba. A scale from above into the chord tone. That really helps. Or sometimes a voicing. Yeah, it's kind of you find a voicing and I do that sometimes, just without playing the guitar. I'll sing a voicing at first, just as long as I don't have perfect pitch, but as long as I have a relative note to go by. I have fairly good relative pitch at this point, and singing really helps. Even singing along when I'm playing. Not great singing, but I'm hitting the notes, some of them. And that's the whole point. You kind of can eventually, you really hear everything you're playing by singing. And also on a guitar, in order to phrase better and leave a little bit more space, if you sing, you're going to run out of breath like a horn player does. And it'll give you a little bit more, feeling for leaving more space, or at least phrasing clearly. It somehow does. It just makes the whole thing make more sense, because horn players use a lot of air. I love that sound, that kind of vocal sound. I use some effects that kind of help me get that kind of sound. And because I like this guitar, these type of guitars, for what I do. Sometimes I like to rock and play a standard all in the same, a vamp at the end. Maybe I'll turn on some distortion and rock a little bit. So a guitar like this is great. I had an archtop Gibson years ago, and that was great, except you turn it up and it feeds back right away. So
when you played on the We Want Miles record, what were you playing? Were you playing a Telly back then?
that wasn't,
Or a Strat?
no, I was playing a Telly then, but that guitar was made by a guy named Kevin Kaufman. It was kind of it was a solid body as I remember it, but I was just trying it out. And he brought it up and he said, you should try this out. And I liked the way it sounded, so I took a chance. Normally I wouldn't do that. I'm too chicken to do that on a record like that. But I used that because it played really easy and it sounded really good.
I'd like to take a second to talk to you about this channel. Believe it or not, 57% of the people that watch here regularly are not subscribed. So I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button now. This will help me get even more of my dream guests in the future. Thank you.
Where did you go from Berkeley to getting to play with Miles?
Interesting. So we were talking about Pat. He then got a call from Bobby Colomby, who was the drummer and the founding father of Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
That's right.
And a wonderful drummer, a wonderful musician in general, just a really amazing cat. So Pat was looking, they said they needed a guitar player, looking for some possibilities, and they called Pat, and he recommended me to do an audition. So I went for the audition thinking I'm going to learn what it's like to have an audition with a band like that, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, famous band, and of course I won't get the gig, but I'll at least get the feeling. But I got the gig. Then I was really in trouble. But it had some great musicians in it. Larry Willis was playing piano.
Yeah.
Bebopper, killer, just a lot of Herbie in his stuff, and just that kind of concept, And Dave Bargeron was playing tuba actually, and a lot of trombone, mainly trombone, and that. Tony Klatka used to write for Woody Herman's band. It was playing trumpet, and Joe Giorgiani was playing lead trumpet. So they had a whole bunch of cats in there. And Jaco Pastorius was in the band for a while, right before he played with Pat on Pat's first record, on Bright Side's Life. Jaco was in Blood, Sweat, and Tears for about 3 months. So that's where I met him, and we got together, and I had actually met him before that at a Pat Metheny gig.
Okay.
At the Zircon.
Were the three of them? Was he playing with Bob Moses?
Yes.
Okay, so it was that trio was
It was
playing.
that trio, and I met Jaco because I had met him in Florida somehow. He's playing with a band in the middle of rock and roll, a rock band, was playing for the gig, and it was at a club, and then he came out to do the jazz stuff, and when all the students would start talking, because they were like, oh, this is that jazz stuff, they're going crazy, and we wanted to hear that rock band that was doing whatever, cover tunes, but I listened, and I heard Jaco, and I went, man, you're amazing. I said, I'm going to Berkeley coming up, and I was, I really want to be able to play something close to what you're playing, on my instrument, guitar. And he remembered, then I saw him years later with Pat at this gig at the Zircon, Pat and Bob Moses and him, and I realized I had met him before, because Pat was saying, you got to check out this bass player. And I forgot the cat's name. So I went up to him and I said, I met you. He said, yeah, man. He had a photographic memory. He said,
okay.
Yeah, I remember at the Flying Machine, that was the club. He said, I remember I saw you there, bro. And yeah, that was a couple of years ago, and like that. Then we ended up playing together with Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And that was an awesome experience, to say the least. Just for me to play in that band, it was a big learning experience, and I stepped all over it for a while. I wasn't, I was doing they liked I could rock pretty good and played some blues stuff, and enough bebop lines, but not much, And I was really following the advice of some of my teachers, mainly Mick Goodrick,
yep.
who you knew, and Pat. Also, go slow before you go fast. Walk before you can run. Kind of. Don't just do a lot of chop stuff that doesn't make any sense. You got to hear every note. You got to really know what you're playing. And so I was trying to do that while I was in Blood, Sweat, and Tears, but it doesn't work that way so neatly sometimes. Like I hadn't finished Berkeley. I went for 3 years, 1 year, and then I took a year off, and then I went for 2 more years, I think.
So the Blood, Sweat, and Tears thing was probably, what, 77 through 80?
Yeah, it was before then. It was before Elvis died. I remember he died and I was out of the band.
He died in 77.
He died, okay, so it was right before then.
Okay.
And so, you know, those 2 years, 75 to 77. And it was a cool experience, but I was, you know, like I said, I was kind of the kid, you know, learning how to play kind of at that point, and those guys were playing their asses off, but it was great to be in that situation. And Jaco told me at that time, you got to learn how to play, you get your chops more. And I said, well, I'm trying to learn kind of slow so I don't bullshit. And he said, well, you're here now, man, and the tempos are being called like that, so somehow you got to figure this out. So I started practicing faster, and it helped my everything because I was kind of ready to do that. I had done a lot of the slow stuff and could hear the lines faster, and I just needed to do more of that. So he suggested a metronome and just pushing it up every week, and that's what I did, and played a couple of bebop tunes and try to play the changes with the and tape them sometimes. I would tape when I was the chords, and then at a faster tempo, and then play along and try.
Would you jam with people in the practice
and
rooms and do stuff like that?
A lot of that. I believe in that. I still do that. I have cats come over and play, or I go over to their place and play, a bass player, a guitar player.
Okay, what about gigs around town at that time in Boston in the mid-70s? Was Riles around?
Riles was around.
1369 Jazz Clubs there then, or no?
Especially when I got finished with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, before I joined Billy Cobham, because Billy called me after that. And I was really lucky to play with all these cats, you know, and my ass got kicked on every single one of those gigs in a good way. You know, I learned a lot. And as I still, you know, I feel like I'm still in that position. I'm always trying to, well, I always will be trying to learn. You know, music is forever. And the more you learn, the less you know what I mean? Because there's so many more questions. It's a universe that's infinite. Then I was playing with Jerry Bergonzi some. It was a phenomenal tenor player.
Amazing.
Ridiculous, and great teacher also.
Yes.
And Tiger Okoshi would be the more electric stuff. He had a band called Baku.
Remember it.
And he was playing and he was a great trumpet player, and it was more electric stuff, and his compositions were really great.
So that you studied with Mick, what kind of stuff did Mick work on with you?
Man, that was the best. I mean, he was just, Mick is the most unsung improviser of all time, you know. He could just, I mean, he had, first of all, so much vocabulary.
Yes.
And then he put it together in such a genius way, you know. So I would, you know, there's one record with him and Joe DiOrio.
Yes.
That's a phenomenal record that people should get. You know, guitar players all over the world should get. Both of those guys were killing.
Yes.
And they just play forever. They play a long version of Green Dolphin Street, and then they realize they're not done yet, so they kind of kept playing.
Now, did Joe ever come out to the East Coast and play? Would he ever play at Berkeley or anything back then?
I played with Joe a little bit just on a clinic at the school out there. The
GIT or whatever
GIT, that's right. And he was teaching there. And but I never saw him in New York. He eventually came back to Jersey, and he was teaching and playing.
Unsung hero, though. Joe, Mick, these guys were...
unbelievable.
Yes.
And they were kind of among Schofield and Bill Frisell, who those cats are my heroes. You know, we came up together, but they're such amazing cats and great people and amazing. And of course, Pat, you know, and a bunch of, Kevin Eubanks was at Berkeley at the same time. He's a badass, amazing guitar player.
Yeah.
But everybody knows that all those people I just mentioned and a lot more know how great Mick was and a great teacher. And, you know, there was a time I got so depressed playing, and I thought, I'm never going to get this stuff. I'm never going to be able to play it like I can play the blues, you know. it comes from the heart, and I can't think and play at the same time like that. And when am I going to? I can't remember all the chords of these tunes. And I said, I'm done. And not only that, I'm so depressed, I'm going to jump out a window or something. It was like that. And Mick he stopped the lesson. He just said, he said, yeah, I remember feeling much the same. He said, I called my mom up and said, come pick me up from Berkeley. I just can't get it. I can't do that stuff with a pick. I can't technically do stuff. He said, then I found something else. I just found some other stuff, and he put on some Bach and just found some other way to, he could bebop his ass off, but he used his fingers more. He had his own kind of technique. He could play great with a pick, I thought, but I think that was one of the things he just came to a kind of a crisis for him in terms of, and when you're into music the way you are, it's like if you feel like you can't learn something, you get to a stumbling block, it's really depressing.
Right.
You think you want to give up. I would suggest to everybody that's listening to this, don't give it up. No matter what level you're at or think you can't do this or that, just keep going. Because its beauty is the effort, most of it. And most of the time you'll get to a place, it may be a little slower, like in my case, but you'll get to a place that's pretty fluent in terms of getting your ideas out. And as Mick Goodrick used to say, he told me this once, he said, your style and your voice is defined as much by what you can't do as what you can do. Lincoln Goines, this great bass player that I played with a bunch, said, when you're doing a practice session, you should start with the stuff that you're just learning at first. Don't start the stuff that you already know, because that's more fun. You wait, you start your practice routine out with the stuff they're struggling with. And then you can reward yourself with getting better at the stuff you already know. Talking about Mick, he was just so phenomenal a musician. Talk about ear training. He had an amazing ear training thing going on. Him and Charlie Banaka said ear training was so important. Charlie would play a C on the piano, and then he plays wacky voicing, and you'd have to guess the notes. At first it just started, that would be an A flat, I hope. There it is. Or you do two notes at once, and you'd play a C on the piano, and then you do two notes at once. Plus transcribing a lot. I guess, you did some of that, or played along with the radio?
I transcribed your solos.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's quite an honor. And basically, I've been transcribing horn players forever, since I played with Mike Brecker, that. And you get such cool, you can't play the whole phrase sometimes the way they play it.
Brecker stuff is so almost impossible to play.
But you go for it and you edit it to a certain degree so you get the idea out, But
okay, wait, so go from Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So how did you get the Miles gig?
From Bill Evans.
Okay,
Bill Evans.
Bill, and then Al Foster was on that.
Yeah, and Bill called
Marcus.
me. Yeah, Marcus and Barry Finnerty, who was an incredible guitar player, but it didn't work out personally.
Okay.
So Miles was looking for a guitar player. I was in town playing with Billy Cobham at the Bottom Line, a great place that used to be there.
Oh, yeah.
It's no longer there, like a lot of great clubs.
Yes.
But I was playing with Billy, and right before we started the set, Bill Evans called me on a payphone they had there in the club. Remember those? Yes. And I said, Bill, what's happening? He said, I'm going to bring somebody by to hear you tonight. And I said, it's not Miles, is it? And he said, yeah, I'm bringing Miles by. Oh, so geez. I just played as good as I can possibly play. And
did you see Miles there with him?
No, I kind of had my head down the whole time. And he really dug it. He called Billy off while we were playing a tune. All of a sudden, we missed the drummer, and it was Miles had gone backstage and said, "Billy, come here." And he said, "Tell your guitar player to show up at Studio B at Columbia Records or wherever it was tomorrow." And I said, "Wow, first of all, where's our drummer?" But no, but when he came back, and after the set. Billy relayed the message, so I said, "Oh shit!" So I went and played. He had me go to a recording studio and try to play over a tune that he'd already done, you know, recording.
Okay.
Just play all over it. And I tried, and I started playing, and I said, Miles, I don't hear it, man. I feel like it's done. You don't want a bunch of other stuff on there. It's got a nice space. Barry's just playing chords, but it sounds really hip. It's real lean, you know. And so don't mess with it. That's why I told him I don't hear it. So he said, okay. So the following week, he had another tune called, which he liked the guitar solo, which I played I was terrified. Needless to say, there's a lot of energy in being terrified sometimes.
Would Miles call you on the phone and say, "Hey, we're doing this"?
Yeah. He called me a couple times on the phone. He had my number. But Bill would tell me, you know, we're going to record next week. He's got another tune he wants you to play on, a new tune. And we did this tune, which he called Fat Time, because he liked the guitar solo so much. Because that was my nickname. That's what he used to call me when I first met him. He said, Fat Time, you know, and that's what he used to call me because I was heavy at the time, and he liked my time feel. He said he thought I grooved really good with Billy Cobham, so that's what he nicknamed me. And then Bill called me up after we did the take, and he said he likes that a lot, and he's going to call the tune Fat Time. And I went, holy shit! Wow, that's quite a compliment. It was fun to play. I mean, it was amazing to play with him. He was funny as hell too. He had a great sense of humor. People know him as a gruff guy. There's always these things he's doing in an interview and he's kind of pissed off. There was so much more.
Okay, was that an act when he was like that?
Oh yeah, sometimes, or it was kind of because he was shy, I think. I really thought he was shy in some ways, believe it or not. It's a weird thing to say about Miles Davis. But he was just sometimes a little bit more, you know, you could tell from his playing, he was extremely sensitive.
Yes.
The kid was hypersensitive.
Yeah.
And he would try to block it out with stuff, you know, he wasn't a Boy Scout with the, you know, he was drinking or drugging and over the years. But sometimes he was just nervous playing. I think sometimes he turned his back to the audience, I think, originally because he was a little shy, and then people made up their own reasons why he did it. And my feeling was he was a little shy, and then he got into it. I mean, the people liked it. It kind of got some exposure, and he was always looking for ways to connect to the audience. That's one thing Miles, he knew that balance. He knew what he wanted to do, but he wanted to get over. He didn't want to just like have music for music's sake that no one could understand. He wanted people that knew nothing about music to be able to understand what the hell he would find something they could hook on to. So there's usually in Bitches Brew or in some of the tunes even, you know, they get, I mean, standards, it's a little easier because everybody knew those music.
They know the form.
But the new stuff that he was doing, you'd hear the bass staying home. You know, it was just grooving.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There was something that would just be staying home. You know, they could go out, but something was holding down the fort and making it, you know, make you swing. You know what I mean? So I think that was very important to him. And he managed it made the music stronger because he had that balance of connecting with people and playing what he wanted to play. And his concepts. I would say writing when he wanted to, but a lot of times he didn't really write the music. And sometimes he did, but he didn't really write it. Like Fat Time, he just came, we were doing the session, he was with the Rhodes there, he said, yes, C. You start on C and then go Spanish. And he played something in A and B flat. And Marcus, thank God Marcus Miller was there, and he kind of could realize what he was saying. And then he just started, you know, whatever the groove is on that. And he started boom, 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 boom. You know, that kind of funky ass line that he started off with. And then he'd go to, you know, this is the bridge. Right, but it starts. and go off from there, and then go to the bridge. And we didn't know what, and he kind of memorized the melody. And so that's how that tune happened. And then at first I was I didn't want to overplay. I was thinking, oh, this is Miles Davis. He likes, leave a lot of space. And Miles just wanted to hear some energy, man. He said,
Right.
And so Bill called me over and he said, the first take, he said, all Miles wants is you to fucking burn out. Excuse me. It's YouTube land. Sorry.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So all he wants you to do is that. Just come up, just get into it. And I could absorb the tune a little bit more. There wasn't really a form, but it just kind of fell into it. Mainly because Marcus and Al, they got that kind of thing going on where they can just, it's like a jam. And it's just, they know what they're doing, where they're going,
Let me just play this. I mentioned Jean-Pierre from the We Want Miles record. And this is Al Foster, Marcus Miller.
Bill Evans.
Bill Evans, yep. Miles. Now this is live, right?
Mino was on this.
Mino's on this, that's right.
Yeah, he wasn't on the record.
Okay.
And yeah, he was on this record, of course, yeah. This is live. In Japan, I think, on me. I used to love the way some rockers and bluesers make the guitar sing and talk. You know what I mean?
It sounds so good.
Oh, thanks, Sid. And Al, listen how Al's a jazz drummer. Listen, he's rocking harder than anybody. Al Foster. What a groove.
Your time feels so good here.
Thanks.
When you hear this, does it bring you back?
I have memories of it, some clearer than others because that was back in those days. but yeah, it's hard not to, there's a lot of stuff playing with Miles when even if I was, had quite a few at a time that you still remember because it's Miles Davis and it just he had such a vibe to him, and just. He was brilliant in such a down-to-earth way, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, there's Einstein, but his brain worked fast as hell. So he was really, I think, hypersensitive and hyper-intelligent, if that's a term.
Did you ever listen to these things when they were done with Miles, or would the record just come out and you'd hear them?
I'd hear them, and I'm one of those guys. I can't listen to my own stuff. That's that ambivalence that I have of doing any of this. But I know I got to do it. There's something in it that's much stronger, no matter what happens to me, and a lot has happened. To get in the way, I want to keep playing. It's just something that's since I was a little kid and just discovered the guitar. It was something that I felt it made me feel good to get into a groove, playing.
At some point, John Scofield joined the band.
Yeah.
What happened with it? I interviewed John. He told me about this.
Yeah, I was late for a plane. I missed the plane, and I'd been messed up. And Miles at that time was trying to get sober, and I was still showing up pretty out, and so he got really pissed off, and I don't blame him. And he called Sco, and then. Instead of Sco playing for the first week, he just sat in the back and played. I wanted Sco to play because I love his playing and I thought he should have been the cat. Anyway, I remember telling Bill, I said, why isn't, Barry Finnerty doesn't work. he was an incredible player also, but just personally. So how come Skull isn't doing it? And I think at that time Bill wasn't sure why, but so I got called to do this. One thing led to another. Bill basically hooked it up, and then I played with Miles, and then I started messing up and getting so high. Then Miles, and he was trying to get sober, he called John, and John didn't play for the whole week, and then he started playing. And at that point, I was paying more attention. I was trying not to get too messed up on stage. I still wanted to keep the gig. and so Miles said, now Fat Time's doing better now. He's not messing up. And so, but he still had Sko there for the whole week, and it must have been really a drag for Sko. He was sitting there, wanted to play. Anyway, eventually he started playing and killing, of course. He played his ass off. And then finally, I was still getting messed up. So finally, I split. Sko did the gig for a while. He split, and Miles called me back because he said, the way he let me go was, he said, it was really one of the hardest. He said, quote unquote, this is one of the hardest things I had to do, but I got to let you go because you're getting too high. And I'd already joined Jaco's band because I saw the writing on the wall.
Was Jaco?
We were getting high like crazy. I mean, that was like.
What was that? I mean,
that was out. But Jaco was still playing his ass off, like a lot of cats could do. Unfortunately, over time, it takes away stuff, And some people will get sober and keep going, and some people, like Jaco, unfortunately, very sadly, it didn't turn out that way. So when Sko came on, he was not exactly a Boy Scout at that time either. Right. So, but he was doing better than me at that time, and so Miles, so I, he let me go, and then when Sko left, then he called me back, and he was real proud of me. He said, "You're a strong man. You must be a strong motherfucker to get sober." And then one time, and then I was over at his house in Malibu, and he cooked me dinner. We were going to do some recording, and I'd gotten out of the rehab a little while before, and I was still nervous about everything. He cooked me some dinner, and he said, "Now you got to do the dishes." So I went to the dishwasher, and I put the dishes in, put soap in, maybe a little bit too much. And I turned the thing on, and about 10 minutes later, bubbles started coming everywhere. And I said, Miles, look at the Chief, look what's happening with the dishwasher. And I said, well, how are we going to fix it? He said, Mike, ask me about a chord or a scale or something. So we left. Then we went to see his horses.
Oh my God!
Kind of blue and all blue. He had 2 horses. Yeah, at a stable someplace, and it was so funny. This cat driving up in a Ferrari, black Ferrari, with this crazy suit on, and said, "Here are my horses. Hey, Carol." Carol brought him over. She was like a typical, horse type person. And Miles is looking like, from New York and funky as hell and well dressed, but it was incongruous to say the least, right, to see him out on the farm, Miles on a farm.
I can't even imagine
but he rode horses when he was little. His father had horses.
Now, you didn't do your first solo record till probably 85 or so, something like that?
It was 85, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't, and it came out in 86.
But before that...
And I did one before then. I did one for a Japanese label called Trio Records, and it was called Niche.
Uh-huh.
Niche. For some reason, I used to go, Niche, and just as a playful thing. Jaco used to do that with me all the time. Niche, guacamole. Some stupid, ridiculous, like Monty Python kind of stuff. The guys, the men that go knee or something like that. It came from that. So the record was called Niche. It was Victor. It came out pretty good. Victor Lewis was on it. Dave Sanborn was on the record. He played his ass off too. Tom Barney was playing bass, played great. He'd played with Miles also, and so and Hiram Bullock produced it. And helped
That's
me
right.
with it,
Okay, yeah.
And then he produced the next one, which was Upside Down.
That's right.
That was
the one in '85. Yeah.
That was one for Atlantic. Well,
Doesn't Jaco play on one track on your on
Yeah,
that record?
he sure does. Him and Steve
Like
Jordan.
track 4 or something like
Yeah,
that.
Mood Swings.
That's right.
I figured that would be a good title for what I was going through, and I still go through, and especially him. It would be a good title for him because he was up and down like a yo-yo, psychologically. And Steve Jordan was on there. It was killing. I mean, he's such a great drummer.
Such a great drummer.
And so that was fun. And Bob Berg. Yeah, we did a lot of gigs, me and Bob Berg, an incredible tenor player.
Yes.
And it's sad. He got in a terrible car accident and died way, way too soon.
So, speaking of that, a lot of these players that you played with, the greatest players ever, Michael Brecker, Jaco, Bob, these people that are not with us anymore, do you feel a sense of, God, I'm so, I'm really fortunate to have played with these people?
Definitely.
Or is it, man,
I wish they were still here.
yeah.
Yes, both. Both. Definitely grateful that I was able to play with them and play with them for a while. And then, I wish they were still around, of course, as friends too.
Yeah.
Jaco and me were really tight, as crazy as we were. I'm so grateful to have played with all those guys, I mean, it's to me, it's like, I can't even believe it sometimes. I would have been happy. I was with Mick Goodrick, studying with him, and I was thinking, well, I hope I can be a teacher at Berkeley, which would still be great. I mean, there's amazing teachers there now, or just a teacher anywhere, and I like to teach too. I teach privately, but now I'm able to go on the road and still play in front of people, so I definitely want to keep doing that, as long as the opportunities are there.
When I look back through your discography, I mean, you really played with everyone. But who's someone that you wanted to play with that you never played with?
Herbie.
Herbie.
I'd like to play with him more, sometimes. I played one thing with him on a Michael Brecker record. I guess it was Don't Try This at Home. That was the one. Yeah, and on one tune. And I wish I could play with him more, man. He's awesome. But his guitar player is incredible. And Chick Corea, I would have loved to play with him more. I was actually asked to play in that band, but I was playing with Michael Brecker, and I just said I want to stay with him. And Chick had tons more work, but I just felt for me, it would be better. I didn't want to go on the road so much, And with Chick, with Dave Weckl and with Patitucci, those cats were living on the road. I mean, all the time.
Yeah.
And I felt like there's a certain amount of stuff that I needed to get to first. And those guys, whatever they did, it certainly worked for them because they are amazing musicians.
Yeah.
But for me, I needed to just stay, teach privately, also be taught.
Okay, so I want to ask you about your accident. You broke both your arms, correct?
I broke both my shoulders.
Both your shoulders.
So I fell like this over some construction in New York, on the street in New York. Broke both my shoulders because I fell like this kind of a quarterback's injury, they call it, because you're carrying the football and trying to not break my hands. And in the emergency room, my hands were fine. But this happened a few days later. It starts creeping up. I kept telling the doctor about it, and he didn't pay attention.
Was it a nerve thing that
It's
happened?
a nerve thing. That's what can happen. And it's not common, but it does happen when you break a humerus bone.
Okay.
I always think that's not so funny.
That wasn't funny, right?
No.
Did the
humerus
nerve
bone.
get severed or something? Is that why?
No, it wasn't severed. It just died.
Okay.
It just died. They died for whatever reason. I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
And it wasn't during any kind of surgery after they put a whole bunch of metal in my arm.
Yep.
Then finally I found this doctor named Dr. Alton Barron, who's helped Elvis Costello and Bruce Springsteen and just did something for Keith Richards. He's one of these guys that really understands He's a guitar player.
A physiology of guitar. Of
He really
people that
knows.
play guitar.
Yeah, so he knew what to do. He said, I got to bend this on purpose. You're not going to have enough strength to bend this by me to hold the pick. So that kind of thing. The only thing is, yeah, the pick still slid around. And there's a friend of mine named Ray Levere, who's a drummer, who told me he had the same problem because he got badly burned. He's got it on his face, everywhere, and his hands are like, just stop here, basically. He doesn't even have fingers, and he still plays the hell out of the drums. So somebody mentioned to him as I was trying to scuffle around, how do I hold the pick? Should I use Velcro and a glove? That's what it started with.
Yeah.
And then somebody said, a friend of mine said, talk to Ray, because he uses something. And Ray said, use wig glue. So I got a piece of, I found some tape that you could tape around. He suggested a whole bottle of wig glue and kind of smearing it all over. And I said, it may work for the drums or whatever you do, but for me, it's got to be a piece of tape. So there's tape that they make that people use that need wigs. So it's got to be, it's the stickiest stuff that you can use that's not Gorilla Glue, that won't take your skin off.
Right.
So I wrapped it around the pick, and it works to a point. Of course, it's frustrating as hell because I hear stuff that's missing, but I can still, kind of. So I figured out a way to do it as well as I can with what I got. You do the best you can with what you got. If you got some arthritis, which a lot of people get, you work around it. You try to keep going anyway. I would suggest it's always better to keep going and to just make it work. Because music comes from here. It really does. So sometimes the way you play a note, even if it's not what you prefer, not perfectly executed, or you wish you could play a lot more notes or something like that, but the way you figure out to play a few notes is a motherfucker. It can be incredible. So, and it's enough. And for me, I was lucky. I could pick pretty much like I always pick. Sometimes it's not as strong, but I can get the notes out. It's not, because sometimes I want it light. Or I like the dynamics that come out. Some loud, some soft. So it's like we're talking.
Yeah.
You don't accent every syllable the same. It's more like you don't. But you know what I mean. It flows, and sometimes that's harder to get, but I'm getting better at it.
Do you have a certain practice regiment that you do every day, a certain warm-up that you like to do?
I try to, and I try to do it now because of this, just playing a little bit, playing a little bit. But I always try to play with another guitar player, for instance, or a bass player, or a piano player, or somebody to come over and play. You could do all three. Next time we'll have to do that. But that's what I try to do. And then I'm still trying to learn some of the stuff Banakis gave me, and some of the stuff he got into some pretty deep stuff and could. So I'm this guy Gary Dial, Garrydial, like the soap, but two R's, is the guy that teaches Charlie's stuff.
That's where I know his name from.
Yeah. And he teaches all of Charlie's stuff and then some. Great teacher. So anybody's interested, you could find some cool. And so I'm still studying with him very off and on.
Mike, you're a lifelong student.
Oh yeah, forget it. That's it. I mean, that's, I think at the end of the day, that's what most musicians are, because you ain't gonna learn this stuff and say it's done. There's no fucking way.
Right.
I mean, you can get to a point where you say that's enough for me. But if you're curious or you want to keep learning, or somebody else plays some stuff and you say, what the hell is that? It gives you inspiration, to keep going.
I want to ask you about your record here. This is Mike's new record. Is this out right now?
It's out in September. There's such great players on it, you know. And then I got inspired by those guys, so I think I played pretty good on the whole record. Which Christian McBride is playing bass, Chris Potter's playing saxophone, Antonio Sanchez is playing drums, Jim Beard was the producer of the record, playing piano, great on everything, plays an amazing solo on this, and then he died a couple of months ago, which was really out of the blue and really tragic. I dedicated the record to him. He's produced a lot of my records. I'm one of those guys that if I don't have somebody to help me get through a record and say, that's good enough, let's move along, I would never leave. You know, I'd still be working on the first tune, you know.
Right.
He will seriously be missed by me and a lot of other people. But amazing musician, and he played great on this, and so I'm really happy we were able to do it. And I'm really happy that Mac Avenue, because they're really good at getting this stuff out there. They're one of the few jazz labels out there now, it seems to me.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad I got a chance to hook up with them.
I saw that I knew that you had the first single out, and I was very psyched that you brought the CD with you so I can check it out.
Oh, I hope you like it, man.
I'm really looking forward to listening to it.
Let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm just so honored that you came here today, and it's just been amazing to get to hang out with you and chat.
For me too, with you, bro. I would love to just come down here and jam sometime.
Anytime.
You know? We don't have to do this if you don't want. Well, let's just jam.
Anytime. I really look forward to checking this out. And
thanks, bro.
And thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me, bro. Thank you very much.
I'd like to once again thank Mike for being my guest today. Remember, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Thanks for watching.